We recently received a bunch of leaks and reports of new Apple products coming into the 2019 year. However, one leak, one rumor interested me above all the other rumors, and that is that Apple is working on a redesigned version of their MacBook Pro, complete with a 16.5-inch screen. And this is kind of a big deal because the 2016, 2017, and 2018 MacBook Pros have faced endless controversy, and a lot of professionals have dinged Apple on focusing more on thin and light rather than focusing on making the most powerful MacBook Pros possible, and a lot of people are looking for Apple for a redesign to see what they can fix from those previous models, leaving many to wonder if Apple should make a MacBook Pro that goes beyond Pro, like a Super Saiyan ascending beyond the level of Super Saiyan. Kind of like the iMac getting the iMac Pro, maybe the MacBook Pro could use a MacBook Pro? Enter Ming-Chi Kuo, and last night he released a bunch of predictions, and one of the leaks and predictions in his analyst report was that Apple was working on a redesigned MacBook Pro with a 16.5-inch display. So what could Apple do in this new 2019 MacBook Pro with a fresh redesign that could address some of the issues we talked about and alleviate a lot of the problems that the Pro market has faced with these newer computers? So I think one of the most important questions to me is, what will the size of this 16.5-inch MacBook Pro be? Will Apple keep going in the linear progression it's been going on, making laptops thinner and thinner and thinner? With Intel introducing 10nm chips this year, maybe it's possible to make a thinner MacBook Pro that could handle the heat constraints that the current model could not handle. Could Apple maybe take a step back and make this new 16.5-inch MacBook Pro even thicker than the 2016 models? This wouldn't exactly be unprecedented either, especially with iPhone territory. iPhones from the iPhone 6 have gotten thicker over the years. Conversely, Apple could also keep a very similar thickness to the current generation of MacBook Pros, and by keeping the same thickness and not making them thinner, and by having the benefit of having those 10nm chips inside of them, perhaps that will make a system that is adequately cooled enough that it won't be facing any throttle issues. What I do think will happen though is that I don't think the physical volume or footprint of the MacBook Pro will increase in any significant way. I think this upgrade from a 15-inch screen to a 16.5-inch screen has a lot to do with the bezel thickness around the current displays of the MacBook Pros. So this MacBook Pro will be more of a bezel-less design, like the iPhone X, like the Apple Watch Series 4, and like the new generation of iPad Pros. I also don't think we'll expect to see a touchscreen on this 2019 model. macOS just isn't optimized for touchscreens yet, and there aren't any major rumors of a redesign for macOS to incorporate touchscreen controls. However, like with the 2018 MacBook Pros, there are further improvements that Apple could make to the Mac display. Most notably, I think that Apple could bring over the ProMotion display, the 120Hz refresh rate, that is currently found inside of the iPad Pro, and as well as bring other improvements like making the screen brighter, improving color accuracy, or maybe even adding an HDR screen, or even an OLED screen. Now, moving along to some of those other issues we addressed in the beginning of this video, what kind of port situation could we expect to see on a 2019 MacBook Pro? And I honestly think the ship has sailed for USB-A. I don't think we will see Apple adding back USB-A to the 2019 MacBook Pros. I point to the 2018 MacBook Air as an example of when Apple had a chance to redo the design of that computer, but still chose not to include any of those legacy ports inside of it. However, I could see Apple adding in an SD card slot. It's one of the biggest complaints about the 2016, 2017, and 2018 MacBook Pros. Moving on to the keyboard, I really think Apple needs to address the concerns and issues of previous MacBook Pro users with the reliability and the key travel on these new 2019 MacBook Pros. We've seen a lot of patents popping up that Apple is working on a glass keyboard with raised keys to make it feel like you're typing on mechanical keys. However, I really can't imagine that that technology is quite ready yet, or if we're even in a pricing scenario where that would make sense. Apple could take the opportunity to switch up the keyboard design and make it more like the current generation of Magic keyboards that are found with the current generation of iMacs. Those keyboards aren't butterfly switches, but they still have a lower key travel than the previous generations of Magic keyboards. And most importantly, those keyboards don't seem to have any reliability issues, so maybe we could see Apple kind of shifting gears, focusing more on bringing that keyboard to the MacBook Pros. Maybe Apple could add some further and further improvements to the butterfly keyboard, making it their 4th generation redesign. But either way, Apple is going to have to do something to really address the concerns that pros have with keyboard reliability and finally fix this issue once and for all. Now, moving on to that top portion of the keyboard with that touch bar, I think this is the make or break moment for the touch bar. Apple really hasn't innovated with the touch bar since 2016. Sure, it has some uses, it's not completely useless, but more often than not, it's really not utilized well. And I can't really see the justification of keeping it there when the benefits aren't really worth the extra money that the technology is being put into that touch bar. Like, I think if we just go on the cost of that touch bar, it's adding at least $300 to $400 on those MacBook Pros. But if Apple wants to keep the touch bar, they need to double down on the touch bar, and that means bringing it across the entire Mac lineup. One of the biggest problems with that touch bar is that it's not guaranteed to be there. So if you go from a MacBook Pro to an iMac, or if you go even to the MacBook Air, there is no touch bar to use. And because it's not always there to use, you kind of lose your memory of how things work with it. And also, developers are less inclined to support the touch bar if they know that every Mac out there isn't going to be supporting it. If Apple does keep the touch bar, I'd also like to see them add enhancements to this. Most notably, I would like to see some sort of force feedback, like with haptic feedback for 3D touch. I think that would be a great addition, so it feels like you're pressing a physical button on that narrow touch strip. However, Apple can take this opportunity by removing the touch bar to not only remove the touch bar, but also remove Touch ID and finally bring Face ID over to the Mac. For me, the 2019 MacBook Pro also represents a big question of what kind of CPU will we find inside of it. Intel is finally on track to be bringing Cannon Lake 10 nanometer chips to the 2019 MacBook Pro. This could maybe lead to better performance, so maybe we don't have the overblown issues like the throttle gate when the 2018 was first announced. But aside from the traditional Intel route of CPUs, is there a different path that Apple could take with the 2019 MacBook Pro? We've seen ridiculous speeds coming out of the latest generations of the iPad Pro, and that doesn't even have a fan inside of it to cool it, with the A12X chip on the iPad Pro getting an 18,000 multi-core score in Geekbench. What could Apple do with a properly fan-cooled ARM CPU inside of the latest generation of MacBook Pros? Maybe the performance would be high enough to make the switch to their own chips this year, and not only would performance be better, this would also save on things like battery life and on heat, meaning that Apple could make a thinner MacBook Pro without having to worrying about the processor throttling. And it could lead to really major leaps in battery performance with ARM CPUs requiring a lot less battery, so these 2019 MacBook Pros could potentially last for days, and maybe we would even see the addition of an LTE version. However, all rumors of Apple switching to their own chips for the Mac lineup have been rumored to start during the year of 2020, and starting with the entry-level MacBook, not necessarily the MacBook Pro. But I think there might be a slim chance, if the timelines meet up, for Apple to incorporate their own chips and take a bold step forward. Maybe it's not the most likely scenario, but anything is possible. Aside from just CPU performance, a lot of pros also want increased graphic performance. Currently, pros have been pretty dissatisfied with Apple's current offerings of the AMD GPUs. AMD is rumored to be bringing in new 7nm Navi chips, and those are reportedly coming in July. So that would line up perfectly with the release of the 2019 MacBook Pro. And these AMD chips could be enough to bring in lower power consumption, lower energy consumption, and of course, increasing graphics performance. And these new graphics cards might be required to drive that new rumored Apple 6K display. So that could kind of be the direction that Apple is going in terms of GPU. Now, aside from the hardware, the redesign, the keyboard fixes, most notably, what's coming in 2019 is a major way we think about the software of macOS. Currently, Apple is just testing this out with their own apps, like the Apple News app and macOS Mojave. So with iOS apps running on a Mac, with the rumors of Apple working on their own A-series chips inside of their MacBooks, this could be a huge year for Apple to fully take advantage of that and have some really optimized experience, not only with macOS software, but iOS software running on the Mac. Now, I have no idea what Apple will price these new 16-inch MacBook Pros at. Usually when Apple does a first redesign of their laptops or their Macs, they're usually priced pretty expensive, maybe a $2,500 starting price, but I don't really know anything about price. I really can't predict it based on what I know now. But what we can expect is that WWDC comes in June, and that usually is when Apple has been shifting to focus more on the Mac lineup. So I think we can expect these new MacBook Pros to be announced during WWDC in June. I think that's when Apple will reveal a lot more information about the future of the Mac lineup, with the rumored redesign of the Mac Pro and this rumored redesign of the 2019 MacBook Pro. All right, everyone, but enough about what I think. Let me know what you think. What are you excited about with the 2019 MacBook Pro? What direction would you like to see Apple go with? What features would you like to see? And what do you think needs to be fixed with the current generation of Apple laptops? If you guys like this video, make sure you give me a like. If you want to see more from my channel, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to support the channel in any way, make sure you check out the links in the description. And as always, I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.